This is Krista. Welcome back to Made to Be Whole and part 3 of our series on diabetes and the potential benefits of intermittent fasting.
Made to be Whole is intended for informational purposes only. It's not intended to replace the advice or care of a licensed healthcare professional. Participating in this podcast does not constitute a provider-patient relationship with Krista Michener, AHP Integrative Health, or any of the guests featured on Made to Be Whole. Krista Michener, AHP Integrative Health, and any featured guests aren't responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from use of information obtained in this podcast or associated materials. Please consult a healthcare professional for any health-related concerns that you are experiencing.
So, we did an overview of diabetes a few weeks ago. Last week, you heard from Brian, who successfully turned things around with his own diabetes diagnosis using intermittent fasting. And he did some longer fasts. And there are questions out there about how long of a fast someone should do, what's safe. I would say a lot of it depends on the individual and factors such as, are you taking other medications? Are there medications that should be taken with food? What what is sustainable for you emotionally and physically? Those are things I think would be best probably like going over an individual basis. But if you pay attention to the principles of fasting that Brian brought up, it's a lot easier to do it safely because fasting doesn't just mean starving. It's not a dry fast where there's no liquid. You can still be having protein and electrolytes to keep yourself in that ketosis state and get all of the health benefits without being unsafe because still have to do things like get off the couch and go to work and function and have relationships. And as we taken and applied these principles in my own family, we've done things differently because they're all different. My biology, biochemistry, endocrinology, whatever is different from my husband's, is different from my kids. And so today we're joined by my son Daniel, who's had some really, really good benefit by applying these principles, and he's done it differently than what Brian did. What Daniel is doing is a daily 16-hour fast, and even doing that, we've had some really great, pretty quick health benefits. Welcome, Daniel.
Hello.
Long time no see.
I know.
So, first of all, tell us, what are some of the things that you've tried before in regards to your health, eating? Weight has been a struggle. You've tried various things. What have you tried? How did it make you feel? And how has this been different?
I don't mind answering any of those questions, but I bet you can answer all of them for me. So, I tried quite a few things. One of the most memorable ones was the calorie fast, where you would only have a specific number of calories in a day, but you could have whatever you wanted if it fit into that, amount of calories. And I did lose weight. I lost, God, what was it? 20 pounds. And then
Around that.
yeah, and then I couldn't lose any more, and I was still very overweight, and nothing seemed to work. I exercised, did a lot of different things. I had tried a couple other things, nothing like too crazy, but just replacing foods. Like, okay, well, there's no way I'm gonna just stop eating everything that's terrible, so I'll cut out regular soda. I'll cut out this and replace it with that. Like, I like sugar, so I was like, okay, well, I shouldn't have super highly processed candy bars, but if you get like some fruit or something, so it's a little more natural, just things like that. And eventually I tried intermittent fasting and I didn't think it was going to work because those first 3 days I thought I was dying. Just wasn't eating for 16 hours. And I ended up doing it for a while. I felt great, but I couldn't function during school at all, and so I stopped it for a while, and now I've come back and been doing it for a few months and lost a tremendous amount of weight, went down 2 pant size, 1 shirt size, and I might need new pants again. We'll see. Uh, I think what really helped was changing the time for my intermittent fasting because, well, I I was really concerned about just the fact that I eat at night. There's no way that's ever going to stop. So I tried to have it from like 3 p.m. to 11 p.m., which is just not working. And so I finally adjusted it to like noon to 8. I've been able to be very successful with that. Some things I've had to take into account is sometimes I take a lot of medications when I'm not eating food, so in the morning and at night, and I get very ill if I try and have it on just water. So sometimes if it's really bad, I'll take a bite of, I don't know, cottage cheese or nut or two, just so it's not a completely empty stomach, and then I start half an hour later than I would have wanted. So I'm still fasting around 16 hours. So you can adjust it in any way that works for you. I have a friend named Curtis from church. He also does intermittent fasting, and he said his 8 hours are different every day, depending on what the needs of the day are. And you can do that.
So I think some things that are key, Daniel originally was doing this really late fast because he's always just like had to eat late. His body was in pain if he didn't. So we said shift the window. But then he noticed the cognitive problems with his schoolwork if he waited too long to eat. So there you absolutely can adjust it based on your needs. And one of the reasons I felt like he would be a really good candidate, I'm going to reference some of the labs we had previously done to give you a little bit of an idea. Now, first of all, you don't need a test to tell you if you're one of those people who usually doesn't even like eating in the morning. I'm the opposite. I wake up thinking about food, so I eat earlier. Not eating later is not as difficult for me. But both Daniel and my husband just they made themselves eat breakfast because they felt like it was important, but they didn't feel good. So Daniel does have in his genetic report we've referenced before, Intellig's DNA, they look at diabetes risk factors, and he has double copies of this MTNR1B gene. It's the melatonin receptor 1B. So individuals with that SNP, that's the single nucleotide polymorphism, have increased and prolonged effects of melatonin. Melatonin helps you sleep and also protects against low blood sugar during sleep by inhibiting insulin release. Individuals with this SNP have residual impairment in their ability to release insulin until later in the morning and often have higher fasting blood sugars and may benefit from delaying breakfast or avoiding carbs in the morning. So fascinating when you think of genes and diabetes risk. People mostly just think, well, my mom had it, my dad had it, my uncle had it. They don't look at what is it that set the stage for that individual to be at higher risk for diabetes. Now, I was particularly interested in that because I'd also done some hormone testing for Daniel, some salivary hormone testing, because he doesn't like needles. So I was happy to do anything that didn't involve a needle. And what I felt was interesting, I was doing this mostly to look at testosterone, progesterone, estrogen levels, those sorts of things. But he has extremely high salivary melatonin levels. When he wakes up, they are just through the charts. Even midday, they're higher than most people's are when they're sleeping. And then later in the day, they're super, super high again. So I knew that was not just a genetic risk that was happening. And I'll read you something with just a little commentary on the melatonin levels from the report. So high morning melatonin levels are often present, interestingly, in people with seasonal affective disorder, prolonged nocturnal production of melatonin, late onset, yada, yada. But it can really, really affect mood. This profile reveals a disturbance in the circadian rhythm of melatonin, which we knew that Daniel's circadian rhythm was messed up and has been for a very, very long time. But I love it when I find objective things that we can measure that help us understand more what's going on. So knowing that and knowing that my husband's the same way, I told both of them, you guys don't even like breakfast. Why don't we just delay when you eat? Pick a time that's reasonable so you're not having the cognitive crash and able to do what you need to do, and then cut off that evening eating later. Now, you mentioned, Daniel, the first 3 days were pretty rough. Tell us what happened after that.
Well, to start, my body thought I was starving it because it was not used to, delaying eating for that long and thought we were going to experience some hardship. But after those 3 days, I just wasn't hungry anymore. Like my body adjusted to this idea that this is when we eat now. We're okay. Things aren't dire. I don't need to, start trying to, slow down digestion or whatever. Because that's what I thought would happen. Because it's been discussed that certain types of fasting really, it slows down the
The
metabolism. It
calorie
doesn't actually,
restriction, that's why
yes.
it's got
Mm,
unlimited.
yeah.
Yeah.
But that's not what happened. I lost a tremendous amount of weight. I didn't check how much because I'm not a numbers person. I figured going down 2 pant sizes, 1 shirt size was enough evidence, you know?
I do think there's a lot to be said for what people can handle, not just practically, but emotionally. Like for Daniel, absolutely, the number on the scale has always been a bit of a trigger. And for the only thing that's really mattered to me as like the mom and the healthcare provider is just him feeling good. And I knew he didn't feel good because when he got really sick, which was right ever after high school, that there were so many things that happened fast. Like he crashed, his exhaustion, he was sick to his stomach, he was sleeping long periods of time. He gained 100 pounds like really, really, really fast. We knew that it was a symptom of what was going on. And when you put in all that effort and you don't see the scales move, some people, the scales are motivating, but I really do think it helps to look more at the things that actually matter. Like, first of all, losing those inches and being able to fit into things and to have the decreased fat around your organs is the biggest thing, but feeling better cognitively, feeling better physically. I have a lot of patients who will start healthy habits, but then quit them because they quote unquote don't work, which they just mean their numbers haven't changed, and they're obsessed with the number on the scale and that as an indicator of their health, and I think for a lot of people, their worth and other things, and it's not great. For a lot of us, it's just not great. It's what you feel like. He also, I'm gonna tell more about you, Daniel, but with the diabetes risk factors from the genetic report, another one that he has is this B3 adrenal receptor beta 3. So, basically, any of us, when we're under stress, our blood sugar naturally rises. Our body's like trying to pull out those stores so we have it to deal with stuff. And whenever blood sugar goes up, more insulin's released. So with this genetic variant, Daniel has less ability to secrete insulin in response to adrenaline, which can lead to high blood sugar, particularly under stress, and an increased risk for insulin resistance. So there are other things that you can do outside of diet. There are things that you can do to manage stress and cortisol levels and to kind of come at this swinging with everything you've got, particularly if you have a lot of risk factors. But one of the reasons I love genetic testing is it takes the guesswork out of it. And instead of me trying to shove a one size fits all diet supplement medication plan down everyone's throat, it can help us figure out where to start. Now, I do think with intermittent fasting, when you're especially doing these moderate fasts, are pretty safe for most people. I think most people can very safely do that, and you don't need an expensive test to tell you that it's helpful. But if you're still having trouble getting things in range, instead of, again, beating yourself up and trying all sorts of crazy extreme things, get some data on what's going on with your body and with your genes and what else might be driving things. So at this point, Daniel, you also have the experience, unfortunately, that a lot of my patients who have these chronic infections. Daniel's got Lyme, Bartonella, Babesia. He's got it all. He's an overachiever. But limiting the window where you eat helps for other reasons because you actually don't feel good when you eat. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, I started noticing when I went on this diet and I just get dizzy, tired, I'd be in physical pain. It was very, very strange. And then I believe you said something about the potential for just, you know, the blood. What was it that you said? Like,
Well, what I posit, I think everyone's a little different, but digestion actually takes a lot of energy. And when somebody's very sick and they're using everything they have to do regular stuff, I think just allowing for that, oh, this digestive process actually takes a lot out of me. So if I'm limiting the number of times I'm eating, and then I can build into my schedule, all right, I'm going to lay down and rest, and then I'll be able to get up and do my stuff. But you've reaped the benefits of that because by eating for a smaller amount of time and fewer times, you don't have to build in as much recovery.
that's true. I also have noticed that I'm able to think a little more clearly. For the past, since high school, you mentioned, that's when the crash happened. I had really struggled to be able to read like at
Mhm.
all. Like it's not like I couldn't do it before. I loved reading. And then all of a sudden I couldn't focus on it at all. And since I started doing this, I've been able to read again, no problem. Not just a little bit. 7 plus chapters every week of a textbook, a college textbook, not exactly thrilling reading, but hey, it's
Plus
happening.
reading for fun too, right? You've been doing
Oh,
more of
yeah.
both?
I've been
Right.
doing more of both, but it's just been really it's been really great. There's been a lot of benefits from doing this outside of just, "Oh, I'm losing weight." I have more energy. I've been able to get up in the morning too. I've noticed that. I didn't used to get up this early and just function and do things. It's like it yeah, it's like it affected my clock.
And what's your motivation? Because a lot of people come to this once they've been diagnosed with diabetes. You hadn't been, but you really, really didn't want to be. You want to tell us a little bit about why?
I hate needles. Not to sound morbid, but I genuinely believed if I ever had to start injecting myself daily, I probably would have just killed myself. It's how much I hate it. It was extremely uncomfortable because I have all these
Sensory
sensory
hypersensitivity. Yeah.
yeah, sensory sensitivities to sound, to touch. When I was very young, you can attest to this, like shoes had to be just right. Bathing was uncomfortable. The feeling of water just being wet was awful, but, it's just things like that, and so, 1, I didn't wanna have to deal with that, but 2, I wanted to be able to beat this. I didn't want to have to succumb to this because I was young enough. I had known at a time that there were risks, and I thought to myself, "I gotta do something," and we tried a lot of other things. We tried the Sweeties supplements, which I don't know if you've mentioned on this channel yet. A lot of different things to try and help manage blood sugar, and this seems to be the most helpful
It
because
fit. It
yeah,
fit. Well, another gene that you have, it's this ENPP1. Because of that, you're less able to let sugar enter your cells due to overactive regulators of the insulin receptors, which can create insulin resistance even when your insulin levels are normal. So, again, that's something you don't have control over, but how you respond to that can help mitigate the risk. So, some of the things that are recommended, weight loss dramatically improves glucose homeostasis, but instead of focusing on the numbers, the weight, you were able to do it. And then if, for somebody who has diabetes, in addition to like dietary recommendations found for different genes, there are supplements that are recommended, but also even in medication choice, like there's actually a lot of good published evidence using metformin for people with this variant. There is limited utility for a lot of diabetes medications. We talked about that before. But if you have to use something, it really, really helps to know that what you're choosing is actually getting to the root cause of what's driving the process in your body. So you're not just blindly throwing more stuff at it that has potential side effects, all of those sorts of issues. Do you think with the sleeping better and waking up better, do you think that has to do with stopping eating sooner, or do you think that has to do with just the fast itself? Did it change when you changed the window?
I think it had more to do with the fast and not how soon I stopped eating. I think it was an unrelated, but I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that my body was in a much better shape because digestion was so hard,
Mhm.
and that the system was kind of overworked. And it just, you know, I think my body was in some ways confused about what time it was just because I couldn't eat until later anyway. And even when I wasn't fasting, sometimes I would wait till 3 to eat, like I just wasn't
Right.
hungry, you know? And
And I'd like to give people a little idea of your progress, not just with this, but just kind of in general when you're talking about energy and you're talking about healing, because healing takes much longer than we would like. So we know that you got garbage from me through pregnancy we didn't know about. I'm positive that you were extra infected when we lived in Tennessee, just based on the things you did in the wilderness and the fact that you and your other brother who lived in Tennessee have some extra things on your labs. It was mostly a lot of anxiety and neurological dysregulation for many years. And then the big crash after high school. And at that point, I mean, we mentioned the weight loss, the fatigue. And at one point, you were in bed about 20 hours a day. I mean, we we finally figured out how to find you a job where you worked late as a caregiver for people, but your progress to where you are now has been pretty gradual. Can you kind of speak to that? Because I think it's important for people to understand the healing process and how true healing sometimes takes time, but it really is possible.
what I would say healing is like is constantly trying new things, watching them not really work, and trying new things till you find something that gives you any benefit whatsoever, keeping whatever part of that was giving the benefit and then moving on. And that's really what it was about. And you mentioned the intelligent test. I think that's how you pronounce it.
Intellix DNA, yes.
Intelix DNA. I just like to mention that like all these different types of diets and other health things, like when we got that genetic report back, that's where a lot of things changed and improved, and that shaved off weight in a lot of different ways even before we tried the intermittent fasting because there were all these genetic issues. So if someone out there has been doing all the right things, diet, calorie restricting, exercising, and they still just can't lose weight, there might be something genetically holding you back. Like I lost about 10 plus pounds of pure water weight when we found out
Based on a
that,
recommendation from that.
yeah,
Yep. Yeah. No, I'd forgotten about that. And it's very, very affirming too, because we got your report back and it was like, oh yeah, he struggles with weight, he struggles with anxiety, he struggles with inflammation. I mean, all these things that were coming up, I think it's affirming. But then taking the guesswork out and what Daniel's talking about actually is really interesting with the water weight. So we had done the panel that included the all the autism risk factors, the neurodevelopmental panel, and it was saying that for people with this particular variant, even with social skills, there were studies that showed that bumetanide, which is a diuretic, can have benefits. And I just kind of, you know, going through reading desperate kind of what do we try next? What do we try next? And I thought, let's go ahead and do that. And I mean, Daniel literally peed off at least 10 pounds the first week. It was super, super bizarre. And we did see cognitive changes too. And now, of course, I think part of that could be benefited by the fact if you don't have 10 pounds. But yeah, it's fluid. 10 pounds is sloshing around you. You're going to feel better. But it's things like that that have been a piece of the puzzle, and I know there's this desperate desire for there to be one answer when people have complicated health problems. They want there to be one thing that they do, and if that doesn't work, they ditch it and they go to the next, or if it doesn't do enough for them, they ditch it. But your willingness to stick with things that even did a little bit has made a difference. I mean, what I would always pay attention when we would start something and you would say, "Oh, I felt something." I can tell that was doing something. I know with some of the binders we use that happened, some of the parasite things. I mean, we've tried a lot of different things, and I just tried to be attuned to whatever you said. I felt something with that. And even though you keep going and everything's not all the way better, we're holding on to what does work because you were the Humpty Dumpty that was pushed off the wall and we're trying to put back together again. And even though there's farther that we need to go, where would you say you are now compared to, well, you're 27, just so people know. So you graduated from high school when you were, I think, 19. You just turned 19. So in that 8-year interval, what has changed and what are you still looking to change?
So, to give some idea of what it was like when I was 19 and I went out of high school, as you mentioned, I was sleeping about 20 hours a week.
A
Was
day.
vomiting. Yeah, a day. My bad. A day. Was vomiting every day, multiple times every time I woke up. Was dizzy, tired, even when I was awake during those 4 or so hours that I was awake. Very, very depressed, very, very anxious, very, very emotional. Now I would say I'm able to deal with a lot of stress in life. I'm waking up on average between 8 and 9 every day, and then being functional by 9 or 10 every day. And there were some adjustments that were made that really helped with that. So I guess for those who have insomnia, maybe this will be helpful before I continue to answer your question. What I did is I started saying every time I get up, it doesn't matter. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a couple things and then I can do whatever else. So for me, because I'm a religious, I would pray, read my scriptures, hop into the shower, take one of my medications, and then I could just relax. But I had to fully get out of bed and I could sit and lay on the couch, whatever had to happen. And when I started doing that, in addition to the fast, that's when naturally I just started waking up earlier and functioning earlier. Uh, some other improvements, just emotionally and socially, I talk and hang out with people now. I didn't really do that before. I've dealt with tremendous stressors. My best friend died and I didn't fall apart. I've dealt with a lot of incompetence with my colleges, and I know it doesn't sound like a lot to you guys, but the fact that I didn't lose my mind and, like, just freak out because nothing was working.
And
I
shut down. I mean, because in the
Oh,
past, you
yeah.
would have just shut down. You would not have been able to manage that, and there was so much, I think, because of the inflammation, so much, like, self-blame, couldn't process, couldn't problem solve. Everything felt like the end of the world all the
Yeah,
time.
and part of it was in some ways, a protection because when your stress gets worse, the inflammation gets worse, and, I felt like the more we've studied this, the more I felt that this response of not being able to cope or deal with things and shutting down
Mhm.
was my body's way of trying to protect me. Some things I want to continue to improve is I want to be able to kind of for most of the day be able to function at all times. I still have to take breaks, but the amount of good times during a day where I can function and think very clearly have continued to increase. So if I could get to like 90% of every day or most days, I'm functional like a normal human being, that'd be great. That's kind of where I want to go. Maybe lose a little more weight so I'm not in pain. I'm not in as much pain as I was, but I still have some, because well, got all this inflammation and extra weight from all these infections and genetic issues.
I think what you brought up too, we talk a lot about creating routines for sleep, but that's actually really smart creating a routine for waking up. For some people, going to bed's difficult, but for some people, waking up is really difficult. And I know for me, once I decided, okay, every day I'm going to wake up and I'm going to go make myself sit in the sauna I mean, prescription and sauna. Like there's certain things I have the same sort of thing that I have to do first every morning. And most of the time, once I do those, I can get up and function. But if I can't after that, and I don't have to be somewhere, I say, okay, well, I did my routine. I'll lay down for a half hour, and then usually you can get up and go. So creating routines, but also realistic expectations, because you're not saying, I'm going to do all these things and then I'm going to go run a marathon. You're saying, I'm going to do these things when I wake up and then we'll reassess from there. But I've been very encouraged and proud of you because it was really bad at one point when Daniel was, 19, 20 and things were really bad. And he would just say, why do I have to be alive? I wish God would take me. And I remember thinking, yeah, I kind of get that. I mean, because I didn't want you to live that way forever. It's not that I wanted you to be gone, but you were suffering a lot. And so I am grateful that you've been willing to stick it with it, even though the gains have been incremental. And you can say, oh, 8 years and you're still not done. But if we wouldn't have done what we've done for the last 8 years, we would be much, much farther behind.
Yeah, but those small gains are permanent. So that's the difference. A lot of these really quick gains, you kind of lose those just as quickly. And to your point about bedtime routines, I forgot to mention, but I also have a routine for bed. It's a little different than I'd assume most people's are. It's read scriptures, do Spanish, listen to this book, take your medication, and then you can do whatever it is that you want. Like if you can't sleep, you can't sleep. That's all right, And
Right.
so I had, and I've started to even have a routine in the middle of the day around lunch, just all these different things to try and help with mental stability. Because what you're doing is you're giving yourself wins. You're lowering your stress and anxiety by saying, well, even if this doesn't work out, look at all this stuff I did to try and succeed.
Right. I gave it a shot. And I think circling back to the fasting, which is where we started, with all of these things, it's finding what's sustainable for you emotionally, physically, socially. I don't do the same thing that Daniel and my husband do because I love eating in the morning and I feel better when I eat in the mornings. But what I do notice, and I'll back up, I would be much better off if I stopped eating at like 4 p.m., but I want to spend time with my family and have dinner with my family. And I don't want to give that up. So I've just made smaller adjustments and saying, I'm not going to eat after dinner, trying to change the sorts of things that I eat. And even that, honoring that principle and that mindset Brian talked about last week of recognizing, okay, it would be nice to go get something sweet to eat right now, but I've had dinner. Yeah, I've got to wait so that my body can go into my liver and take out the trash and do all of these other things, and to not deprive yourself in a way that's not sustainable, because we're human, we're part of families. We have to still, you don't want to be that person, because everybody has one of those in their life where their food routine is prime over everything. And you just don't want to do that. You want to create sustainable things, but know that every small effort, if, like Daniel said, it's permanent, is building the foundation for a better future. So thank you for helping, Daniel. Thank you for tuning in. And remember to have hope, because you were made to be whole.
Have a podcast question or suggestion? Text or call us on the podcast info line at 330-439-0686. Thank you for spending time with me today. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to be notified when new episodes release. And remember, you were made to be whole.